Right, well, it's been a while, hasn't it? I remember there was a version of me that was going to make devlogs once a week, and the last one was 100 years ago?
It's been too long.
Or August, which is a very long time ago. But that's not without reason. There was actually a point where I had written a full script for a devlog about how I hadn't done any game dev for like 2 months. Because game dev is transient, and sometimes you do lots and sometimes you do very little at all, both of which are fine, but you know, life gets in the way of stuff. For me personally, September to November were pretty crazy last year. I literally didn't touch my game at all because I had a very busy work project that involved international travel, which I did not enjoy. And we also had some major house stuff done because we're having a baby soon, which is cool, but you know, terrifying. So yeah, I was kind of out of action for like a long time and only really picked things back up in December when I had a bit of downtime from work. In fact, it was so long between game dev sessions that Unity more or less broke. I had it closed for so long that when I tried to reopen Unity Hub, it just had a full-on like meltdown, and it took like a couple of days for me to figure it. Basically, I didn't fix anything. It fixed itself eventually, but Unity Hub wasn't like recognizing that I'd ever built a game, which was like horrific, but sort of solved itself in the end. I don't know. And then December and January were quiet enough with work that I kind of got loads done. So I guess the main thing that I think is cool to talk about is voice acting for this episode.
Well, that was pretty ominous. I'm just gonna go ahead and assume it's none of my business.
But before I got to that point, I had to do a load of like polish that was like stuff on my big game to-do list Trello board. A lot of that was like final tweaks to the script, minimizing assets and stuff, because I had a bunch of animations that I'd made out of like hundreds of very large PNGs, and ultimately a lot of that was just replaced with quite small compressed videos because I'm keen to not have a game that's like 100 gig, and then just killing various bugs and stuff that I came across and doing some like fun camera bits and bobs, basically like real polish, like last minute niceties, more than fundamental bits and bobs. And that took us on to voices. Now, I've always wanted this game to have like voice actors in it. Voices make things just much more immersive to me, so I was always keen to do that, but I didn't know how, or it was always this big thing on my list. It was like, oh yeah, voices, we'll do that at some point. I'll figure it out when I get to it. And then come December, it was time to get to it. So let's talk about the various steps along the way before I show you kind of some fun clips with voices in it. So in Adventure Creator, the first thing you're going to do once you think you've like finalized all your game dialogue is to gather all the text, make a backup before you gather the text, and then you can export it in various ways. So you can pump out a whole game script, you can pump out versions that are just like lines, line by line, or you can specify which character you want to focus on. So the first big job was that. It was exporting script formats and just line by line word count formats for every character, because that way I could see how many words each character is dealing with, and that would inform, you know, costs for hiring people. Now, I went about this in a bit of a strange way originally, because when I put together the game's intro, which serves as the story trailer that's currently on Steam, I needed a voice for the main character, right? Ages ago, I found a chap called Greg Johnson on Fiverr, listened to his samples and was like, yeah, that's the kind of guy I want for Tom, my game's main character. So I saved that, and I'll come back to it later and I'll find someone that sounds like that guy. When it came to making that trailer, I was like, well, for the purpose of this trailer, let's just use that guy because he's good. Loads of people then told me, other than saying they thought it was going to be British, that the guy's voice was really good, and I agreed. So I messaged Greg and said, look, you know, there's a lot of words here for the main character. At your normal rate, I don't think I can afford this. What can you do? And he was nice enough to put together a kind of economy of scale deal for me, which was less than I was anticipating. And so I went ahead and said, yes, please, let's do that. And gave him the script, sent him on his way, and more or less a week and a half later he had recorded every single line that the main character says in the game, which was a 6-hour file. Now, a lot of that was like alternate takes and also like spaces between the takes. I would say in real terms it was like 2 hours, but still that's a lot of like voice work, right? And he did an absolutely like amazing job. I'll talk about like full costs in a bit, so don't worry about that. I will circle back. I will talk about that. But yeah, suffice it to say, he smashed it, and he sent every line in one big format that was easy for me to work with. So for the other characters, once I'd spat out all of those like word count sheets and I knew how many words each character had, I wanted to put together a casting call. I'd already been lucky enough to have lots of people, you know, in the comments of these videos and stuff say they'd like to do voices, and that's great, but I wanted to be as kind of democratic as possible with this. So I put together a whole big document and shared it far and wide. Now, I had not put together a casting call before, and I don't know what they look like, but my one looked like this. It's basically like a big PowerPoint presentation where I explain about what the game is, I explained about the process that I wanted to do this by, and deadline and payment and stuff like that. And then for each character, a couple of audition lines and a little description about who they are for what that's worth. So I bundled that together, hosted it on a little Google Drive link and made a few social posts for it. And I was then roundly blown away by like the response. I was lucky enough to get over 100 people submit auditions, and most of them wanted to like audition for like every part that they could. So that was an awful lot of auditions to go through, which was, to be honest, like amazing. The deadline for that was January, or the 1st of January. And so in the first week of January, I had a mild panic about how I was gonna sift through all this stuff. My wife was an absolute legend in that process. She's very good with spreadsheets and she likes to project manage. So she basically put together a massive spreadsheet of all the people who auditioned on one side, all of the characters on the other axis, and then put crosses in all the ones that each person had done. And then we literally just went email by email listening to all of these takes. I paced around like some kind of big shot Hollywood exec and was just like, yes, no, maybe this person should be that person. And we had like a little color coded system. It sounds very cutthroat, but to be honest, with that many, I felt like I did kind of have to be a bit cutthroat. It's a very lucky position to be in. And anyway, that landed us with 12 people for something like 16 roles. So there was some doubling up, but I thought that would help in terms of just expediency, I guess. So I spent like a day putting together some kind of boilerplate contracts for the people I would like, which just sort of said, you do this, please, I will pay you this, and I won't steal your voice in weird ways. And then emails to all of them as well. So I wrote all these out first, then just like kind of attacked them all at once and hoped they would still be up for doing what they said they wanted to do. And they all were, which is great. So with contracts signed and scripts sent over, it was kind of over to them. Now I've seen a lot of like indie games in the past talk about voice acting or show the process of their voice acting recording, where the person who's kind of the director of the game sits on like a Zoom call with the actors and does a really long session where they're like directing the lines. To be honest, I cannot think of anything worse than doing that. I already hate doing this. So yeah, I didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do was give everyone a script where their lines were included with the main character's lines, so they could see what they were replying to and there was some context there, even though the script format is a bit of a mess because the way Unity spits things out is like the order in which I wrote it, which isn't helpful, but I told people that's the case and said, off you go. Any questions, give me a shout, and just left it with them, basically. Most people were kind enough to do like a few takes per line, just so I had some to choose from if they weren't quite sure of like what I meant with that specific interaction. But by and large, they all got it and it was fine. So one thing I did put in the contract and in the casting call was that I wanted like the potential for up to one round of revisions, meaning if they give me a line that was supposed to be a sarcastic statement and they'd said it as a question or whatever, then I could go, actually this line, this line, this line, can you just redo those? And I think for most people there have been a couple of revisions, but really minor stuff, and by and large it's been a very efficient process and I have avoided having to sit on a really long Zoom call. So I don't know, you might want more control over this but if you do the same thing, but for me this was fine. Like, these voice actors are good people, they know what they're doing, and I'll do basically anything for an easy life. Okay, so how do you add voice lines to a computer game once you have the voice lines? It's a very good question, and it's one that I didn't know the answer to even as I had hired these people. But I thought, you know, I'll figure it out. Adventure Creator is pretty robust, I'm sure this is simple. It's actually simpler than I thought. So, in a very basic sense, Adventure Creator wants you to create a folder within the audio section called resources, and within that folder one called speech, and then you basically just bang every individual line into that folder saved as its line ID. So when the script is exported, it assigns an ID to every single line. So if the line is like, hi, my name's Tom, then the line ID would be Tom001. So you save that clip as Tom001, and in the back end, Adventure Creator goes, that's the line, that's the audio file, play that. It's super simple. The hard part is just taking these big audio recordings and exporting them as these individual slivers. So I will share with you the best way I found to do that as kind of a tech idiot. So what I did was use Audacity. So with Audacity, you can set up keyboard shortcuts for various processes. So I set up a shortcut for export this highlighted section into this folder, and I would just map that to S key for some reason. So then my process was I would load up Audacity on one side, I would split the screen with the script, I would copy the little line ID, I'd listen for the line that I wanted, highlight S, paste the line ID, enter, that's saved. Next one, same thing, copy the line ID, listen to it, highlight it, S, paste, enter. And you just do that over and over and over again. It's really like monotonous, but it's fine. You know, there are worse processes in the whole game dev landscape for sure. I think the only thing I struggled with was different actors having different setups, just trying to make everybody's volume feel the same, which is not something I've totally mastered, but a lot of it is just like amplifying NPC lines to match the protagonist lines and vice versa. And then the last thing as well was I realized that, so I was exporting everything as WAV, right? WAV? I've always called it WAV because idiot. So go with me on WAV for a second. But WAVs are quite big files, or relatively big, but Unity accepts a file format called OGG, which is a lot smaller. It's like 1/10 of the size per clip. So I found with some quick Googling that Audacity has this amazing thing called macros, where you can set up a macro, which is basically like a little workflow to do whatever you want. And so I found one that said, open this file, export it as an OGG, and then put it in this folder. And then you don't have to do anything. You can point it to a folder, select all the files and say, run that macro on these files, and it will just go, and then spit every single thing out as an OGG. Then I just replaced the WAV files in my Unity folder with the OGG files and saved, yeah, like 90% of the space, which is great. So yeah, this is all pretty much done now, voice acting stuff, and I will show you some in a sec, and I will talk about cost in a sec. I just wanted to talk through 3 quick learnings from this process. So one is, I didn't really realize this going in, but there is a difference between a professional voice actor and someone who just wants to have a go at voice acting. And I know that sounds really harsh, and you might be watching this saying, well, I gave you an audition and you haven't even replied. And I do plan on replying to the non-successful people, it's just there's a lot and blah, blah, blah. But like some of these voice actors were like really good, and they nailed a bunch of these roles. And a lot of people were like, yeah, that's fun, but there's a difference, and it's very hard to articulate. But it's like, you know, with like Hollywood actors, there are people who are like just superstars and they have some kind of quality that other people don't. I think it's like that with voice acting. There was just a big gulf between the people who I thought were great and the people who were just like, you know, enjoyably sending in an audition. So make of that what you will, I guess. The second thing I learned was that after like years and years of having been building and testing this game and writing dialogue and then watching that in silence, even though you've picked voice actors that do a really good job for what you imagined, it's strange and takes some adjustment when you then play the game and they have voices. Just because you'll never get voice actors to say certain lines exactly the way that you imagine them in your head when they're silent and when you're reading them. And I don't think that like players will have this issue, but for me, having written and then been reading these lines for a very long time in my head, yeah, there's some sort of like remapping your brain needs to do to go like, okay, it sounds like that now, and it is good, and that is, you know, that line is still funny or whatever, it's just different to how I imagined it. It's a very weird and unique little process you have to go through, I think. And my last learning was please don't have any big inefficient dialogue trees, because I did, and that involved some of the actors having to say the same lines over and over and over again because my trees didn't relink up and use like that bit again, it used this like a duplicate of that. And if you have like a huge dialogue tree that references itself, try and make that simple, because yeah. So costs, the fun stuff or the juicy stuff, right? Look, this is a self-financed game. It's probably not going to make a huge amount of money. I didn't do a Kickstarter. I have some savings in the bank, but this is not a AAA game. So I settled on a pretty arbitrary cost for most of the characters of 20p, which is about 25 US cents per word. Said that up front in the casting call, under the assumption that I would then only get auditions from people who were happy with that cost, and that's exactly what happened. The main character, I haven't even worked out what that it was per word, because there were an awful lot of words. It was something like 19,000 words, I think he did, and he charged me just over £1,000, which is probably, what, $1,200 or something. Look, all told, about £3,000, which is a lot of money. I'm seeing it as an investment. You know, I want people to buy this game, ultimately. Maybe it'll only make £3,000 ever, in which case I'll have broken even, but I'll have made something that I'm really proud of. So it is what it is, but there you go. That's how much this cost. Anyway, yeah, and now it's pretty much done, and all the voices are in, and it's really fun to like play and listen to. So here are a few little fun clips for you.
Hi, Clarissa.
Like, hi.
What's with the swing? In fact, where are all the desks?
Desks are a prison for the mind.
Really? I just keep my lunch in mine. You gotta be kidding me. You again?
Huh?
I thought you left.
Kid, I ain't never seen you before in my life.
What do you know about Biggleboss Inc., Zeb?
Everything you need to know about it can be found in Mr. Biggleboss's new book. The purple one's over by the window. You want me to check one out for you?
Good God, no. Wait, does it have pictures?
Nope.
Then yeah, still no.
What are you in the mood for?
Something exotic.
Ah, exotic is it now?
Sure, why not?
Well now, I'll tell you, I once went to Hawaii, and you know what I saw there?
What?
Cocoa nuts, would you believe?
Okay.
Very exotic are coconuts.
Okay. So, no exotic drink?
But to be sure, I had hundreds there.
Yeah, dude. What's the story?
Say, that's a nice hat.
Thanks, my dude. I got it from the ground.
Yeah, voices are fun, aren't they? So yeah, nothing left to do really, other than testing. So to that end, I've already sort of started the process of trying to get some beta testers from the Discord server, which I'm very appreciative that people want to do that, because it's basically unpaid work and involves lots of filling out forms, because I'm sure there'll be loads of bugs and stuff. My rough aim is to kind of set those guys up with a build of the game and say, please can you test this now, and then disappear whilst we have this baby for a while. Because then at least I don't have to worry about bugs and stuff, because I'll be worried about changing nappies and things. And then it's just like, yeah, pick a release date, I guess. I'm thinking end of April, but it's hard because I don't want to compete with any other big games in this genre that are coming out, or big games in general, I guess. I know Old Skies is coming out in the spring. I know that Rosewater is coming out in the spring. I don't really want to release in the same week as either of those, but I'll figure that out. And I'll maybe do like another little video just to announce that release date. And hopefully with like a gameplay trailer as well. Now that I have voices, I can make a proper trailer, and that will go alongside a big bunch of like marketing assets that are on my list to just peck away at some point over the next couple of months. Basically so that I don't just drop the game into the digital bin. I want to make a bit of fanfare about it and get people to know that it exists. So yeah, that's where we're at. Look, thanks for watching. Obviously wishlist the game or I won't be your friend.